There is a quiet kind of failure that does not look like ruin. It looks like composure, like intelligence holding itself together. From the outside, nothing seems broken. From the inside, something has been slowly thinning out. Some people do not lose their way through chaos, but through clarity. They see too much, too early, too precisely. They learn restraint before desire, caution before movement. And over time, life becomes something carefully understood rather than something fully inhabited. What makes this unsettling is not the absence of ability, but the presence of it, unused, protected, waiting. A sense that nothing catastrophic happened, yet something essential never quite began. And the question that lingers is not how things went wrong, but how so much intelligence learned to disappear so quietly. The intelligence that observes too much and acts too little. There is a kind of intelligence that learns to watch before it learns to move. It notices patterns early, senses consequences ahead of time, and reads the room long before anything is said out loud. Nothing escapes it easily, but this early clarity comes with a quiet cost. When everything is seen in advance, action starts to feel unnecessary, even dangerous. Life becomes something to be interpreted, not entered. Thought arrives before experience and slowly takes its place. This intelligence does not stall because it lacks understanding. It stalls because understanding multiplies endlessly. Every possible outcome branches into another and then another, until the simplest decision feels weighted with meaning. What should be a step turns into a mental rehearsal that never ends. Clarity becomes overexposure, and movement begins to feel reckless compared to the comfort of knowing. There is also a subtle refuge hidden in observation. Watching preserves dignity. It avoids public error, protects against visible failure, and keeps one safely positioned above the messiness of trial and mistake. Others act and adjust in real time. This mind stays back, refining its perspective. But safety, when prolonged, turns into distance. And distance over time becomes absence. Gradually, action itself starts to look crude, too immediate, too imprecise. As if those who act simply have not thought deeply enough. So thought replaces risk, and potential replaces reality. Remaining unrealized begins to feel preferable to becoming concrete and flawed. Possibility feels cleaner than proof, yet something accumulates quietly in the background. Not failure, but weight. Unlived choices, unstarted paths, versions of life held entirely in the mind. They do not collapse dramatically, they simply take up space, and carrying too many imagined futures leaves little room for a real present. At some point, a difficult question surfaces without asking permission. When did observation stop being awareness and start becoming delay? When did insight turn into shelter? Perhaps the greatest danger of this intelligence is not that it misjudges life, but that it waits so long to enter it that life continues without it. The invisible weight of understanding the world too early. Some people arrive at understanding before they arrive at protection. They grasp how power moves, how people mask intentions, how systems reward certain silences and punish others. This awareness does not come with ceremony. It simply settles in, quietly, long before the person has the emotional distance to carry it lightly. What should have been gradual becomes immediate, and the world loses its innocence all at once. Understanding too early creates a strange asymmetry. You see the mechanics, but you are still expected to play as if you do not. You recognize contradictions before you have language for them. You notice unfairness before you are allowed to challenge it. So you adapt internally while appearing compliant on the surface. Insight stays private, unshared, and heavy. This early lucidity rarely feels like a gift at the time. It feels like an obligation to be careful. Careful with words, careful with expectations, careful with hope. The mind learns restraint before it learns trust. And restraint, once internalized, does not easily loosen its grip. It becomes a default posture toward life. There is also a subtle grief embedded in early understanding, not dramatic, not named, but persistent. The grief of realizing that many outcomes are already constrained. That effort does not always correlate with reward. That sincerity is often negotiable. This knowledge does not stop desire, but it complicates it. As the years pass, this weight reshapes ambition itself. Dreams become quieter, more conditional, easier to justify abandoning, not because they lack value, but because the cost of believing in them feels too exposed. Hope becomes something to manage rather than follow, and caution, once a survival tool, turns into a permanent lens. Sometimes the question is not why motivation faded, but when understanding arrived without mercy. At what point did seeing the world clearly become heavier than the not yet knowing ever was? The paralysis born from excessive self-awareness. There is a moment when awareness turns inward and never quite returns. The self becomes an object under constant inspection. Every impulse is examined, every intention questioned, every reaction observed from a distance. Nothing is allowed to pass through unfiltered. Living becomes a form of monitoring, and spontaneity begins to feel almost irresponsible. This kind of self-awareness does not announce itself as a problem. It presents as refinement, as depth, as emotional intelligence. But slowly, it introduces friction into every movement. Before acting, the mind checks motives. Before speaking, it evaluates impact. Before choosing, it audits identity. What emerges is not restraint, but hesitation layered upon hesitation. You are never just sad, you are aware of being sad. Never simply confident, you analyze whether that confidence is earned or defensive. Experience splits into two, the feeling and the observer watching it, and the observer is never satisfied. It always wants more context. Over time, this internal surveillance weakens momentum. Action requires a certain blindness, a tolerance for partial understanding, but excessive self-awareness demands coherence before permission. You must know who you are becoming before you begin. You must justify movement before movement is allowed, so nothing moves. The irony is subtle and persistent. The more clearly you see yourself, the harder it becomes to inhabit yourself. At what point did knowing too much about your inner life make it impossible to simply live it? The silent fear of wasting one's own potential. Beneath all that observation and restraint, another presence settles in quietly. Not panic, not urgency, but a low, persistent tension. The sense that something valuable exists and is slowly being left unused. Potential becomes a private pressure, never spoken aloud, never fully examined. It is carried like a fragile object that cannot be dropped, yet also cannot be placed anywhere. This fear rarely takes a dramatic form. It does not shout that time is running out. Instead, it whispers that there will be a better moment later, a cleaner context, a more appropriate version of the self. So waiting feels reasonable, almost responsible. Potential, when left unrealized, starts to distort perception. Every small choice feels heavier than it should. Every detour feels suspicious. Rest begins to resemble avoidance. Enjoyment feels undeserved, as if it should be postponed until something meaningful has been done. There is also shame hidden inside this fear, not the shame of failing publicly, but the quieter shame of never fully trying, of knowing privately that the limits encountered so far may not be external at all. This thought is rarely faced directly, so the mind negotiates with itself. It reframes delay as discernment, caution as maturity, uncertainty as complexity. And slowly, The idea of what I could have been starts to feel safer than confronting what is actually unfolding. At some point, potential stops feeling like a promise and starts feeling like an accusation. Not because it demands fulfillment, but because it remains present long enough to ask whether waiting has become its own form of loss. The internal comparison with ideal versions that never existed. Over time, comparison turns inward, not toward others, but toward imagined selves, versions shaped by intelligence, opportunity, timing, and perfect alignment. They were never real, yet they remain strangely persuasive. They hover in the background as silent standards, measuring every outcome without ever being tested themselves. These ideal versions are careful constructions. They carry all the clarity without the hesitation, all the courage without the risk, all the discipline without the exhaustion. They succeed effortlessly because they are untouched by circumstance, and because they never lived, they never failed. Their perfection is protected by absence. Living next to these internal ideals creates a quiet erosion. Nothing feels sufficient when compared to something unexposed. Every real attempt appears compromised. Every imperfect result seems like proof of personal decline. Reality, by nature uneven, cannot compete with a fantasy that never had to move. This comparison rarely feels dramatic. It feels like mild dissatisfaction, a constant sense of underperformance. Achievements are discounted. Progress is reframed as late, and self-trust thins, not from external criticism, but from an internal benchmark that keeps shifting upward. What makes this comparison especially corrosive is that it appears reasonable. It masquerades as high standards, self-respect, ambition. But standards that cannot fail cannot guide either. They only observe, silently judging from a distance they themselves never have to cross. At some point, a difficult awareness emerges. Not that one has fallen short of who they could have been, but that the comparison itself was never fair. How long can a life be measured against a version that was never required to live? The pride that prevents asking for help. Pride rarely looks like arrogance from the inside. More often it feels like composure, a quiet insistence on handling things alone, not to impress anyone, but to remain intact. Help implies exposure, and exposure implies the possibility of being seen inaccurately. For someone who has lived through constant self-evaluation, asking for help can feel like losing authorship. It means admitting that the internal system is not self-sufficient. That clarity is not the same as capability. That insight does not automatically produce movement. And this admission can feel heavier than the problem itself. There is also a particular fear attached to being the capable one. When others expect competence, requesting support feels like a rupture. As if the image must be maintained, even if no one demanded it explicitly. So struggle is kept private. Difficulties are translated into silence, and the person becomes skilled at appearing fine. Some pride is inherited, not genetically, but culturally, emotionally, atmospherically. In certain environments, need was treated as weakness, or as inconvenience, or as something to hide until it passed. So independence became a kind of moral posture, and self-reliance, once necessary, stayed long after it stopped serving. But pride has a quiet side effect. It isolates the mind inside its own complexity. It turns every problem into a solo task, even when the problem is not meant to be solved alone. And then failure becomes more likely, not because the person is incapable, but because they refused the ordinary human exchange that makes endurance possible. At some point, a question lingers without resolution. Was the refusal to ask for help really strength, or was it a way of avoiding the risk of being understood imperfectly? The failure that does not announce itself only accumulates. This kind of failure rarely arrives with a clear moment of collapse. There is no single decision that ruins everything. no dramatic turning point that can be named with certainty. Instead, it forms slowly, almost politely. It accumulates in small postponements, in choices that feel harmless at the time. Because nothing visibly breaks, it is easy to miss. Life continues to function. Days are filled, responsibilities are met, conversations happen as usual. From the outside, there is no obvious sign of loss. But internally, something begins to thin. Not hope exactly, but density. Each compromise seems rational on its own. Each delay appears justified by context, timing, readiness. Taken separately, none of them look like failure, but together, they form a pattern that is harder to ignore. A quiet narrowing of possibility. A gradual reduction of what feels reachable. This failure is especially difficult to confront because it does not contradict intelligence. In fact, it often hides behind it. Reason explains why now is not the moment. Insight reframes retreat as wisdom, and caution keeps everything looking intact on the surface. What makes this accumulation dangerous is that it leaves no clear enemy. There is nothing to fight, no mistake to correct. Only a growing sense that something has been left unattended for too long to be easily named. Failure in this form feels less like defeat and more like erosion. And then a question begins to surface, quietly persistent. If nothing ever truly collapsed, when did things begin to quietly disappear? The bitter lucidity of realizing too late where one stopped. There is a particular kind of clarity that arrives without relief. Not the clarity that opens paths, but the one that simply reveals where movement quietly ended. It does not come with shock. It arrives calmly, almost politely, as if it had been waiting for the right moment to be noticed. This realization often appears in ordinary circumstances, during a pause between obligations, in the space between what was planned and what now feels unlikely. Nothing dramatic needs to happen. The recognition forms slowly. Life continued, but not in the direction once assumed. What makes this lucidity bitter is not regret alone, but the precision of hindsight. You can trace the exact points where hesitation felt reasonable, where restraint appeared intelligent, where waiting seemed harmless. Each choice made sense in isolation. Together, they outline a stillness that went unquestioned for years. There is no comfort in blaming external forces here, not because they did not exist, but because the awareness is more intimate than that. You recognize your own participation, not through dramatic refusal, but through subtle consent to delay, through choosing understanding over exposure, clarity over risk. This awareness does not demand immediate correction. It does not offer redemption arcs or renewed urgency. It simply stays, a quiet witness to the distance between who you are and who you once assumed you would become. And that distance feels final in a way that effort cannot easily undo. Perhaps the most unsettling question is not what could still be done, but when exactly you stopped moving and began calling it patience. What remains, in the end, is not a single mistake that can be corrected, but a pattern that slowly took shape while everything still looked intact. A life that did not collapse, did not implode, did not openly fail, but gradually narrowed, quietly, almost politely. Intelligence was never absent. It was present at every step, explaining, contextualizing, softening the edges. It protected against obvious errors, public embarrassment, reckless exposure. But in doing so, it also protected against friction, against momentum, against the kind of disorder from which direction sometimes emerges. Nothing here resolves neatly. There is no clear line between prudence and retreat, between patience and paralysis, between self-knowledge and self-containment. Only the lingering awareness that understanding alone does not guarantee movement, and that a life can be thoroughly examined without ever being fully entered. Perhaps what endures is not regret, but a quieter recognition that some failures do not announce themselves to be avoided, they simply accumulate until they become familiar. And familiarity, more than fear, is often what keeps things exactly where they are.